Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Stermach, and now we'll unveil the top news of recent days. The Kremlin is again trying to convince everyone on its military strengths. Today, a parade was held in Moscow with the participation of aviation and military equipment. Still, in order to show power, you need at least some kind of equipment, and not just cadets. In fact, May the 9th has alone turned into a propaganda event for the Russian authorities rather than honoring its veterans. After all, while high-ranking officials watch the parades, the surviving participants and victims of the war live in poverty. Countries poorer than Russia value World War II veterans much better. Last year, on Victory Day, the Russian authorities gave 10,000 rubles, a little more than $100, to in Uzbekistan. They paid 12 times more, and in Kazakhstan 26 times more. By the way, Russian propagandists are already loudly talking about unprecedented international support for Russia. Today, a record number of foreign representatives attended the Victory Parade in 4 years. 9. Once again, 9 leaders came to Moscow for the Victory Parade, such a diplomatic victory. By the way, a few more country leaders have come to Moscow since the beginning of 2024. At the parade, the guests were the president and Putin's accomplice, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus Lukashenko, as well as other leaders of the former Soviet countries, the president of Kazakhstan Tokayev, the head of Kyrgyzstan Japarov, the president of Tajikistan Rahmon, the leader of Turkmenistan Berdi Muhamedov, the head of Uzbekistan Mirzoyev. Well, what about influential allies from distant countries? There were Cuban president, Laotian president, and the leader of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau. Are we expecting a new military political union, since the CSTO is no longer working very well? But what's interesting is that although the parade took place in Moscow, another traditional event, Immortal Regiment, was cancelled. Officially, it was supposedly due to security reasons. That is, officially, the Russian government cannot protect its citizens, but they showed the military equipment on Red Square. Although the Russian engineering that was burned on Khreshchatyk looked more familiar, so the Immortal Regiment meetings in Russia have been cancelled, although they are taking place in other countries. Do you know why it was cancelled in Russia? Last year, a certain number of portraits of the occupiers killed in Ukraine were brought to the rally. This year, the number of such pictures may increase. And this is really scary for the Kremlin. It is so scary that it's easier to cancel the ideological party completely. No gathering of people, no visualization of the quantitative assessment of the problem, and nothing spoils the king's mood after the coronation. And what about ordinary people? There has always been a disdainful attitude towards them in the Kremlin. As in the Second World War, when more than 20 million Soviet soldiers were killed, as now. The tactic of meat assaults remains the only effective one for the Kremlin. NATO, in a highly confidential and unofficial manner, has identified at least 2 red lines along which direct intervention by the alliance in the war in Ukraine is possible. La Repubblica writes about this. As the publication emphasizes, at the moment there are no operational plans for sending troops to Ukraine, and the described red lines should be considered only as an assessment of possible plans in case of emergency situations. For the first red line focuses on the option of direct or indirect participation of a third party, for example, in the event of a possible breakthrough in northwestern Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. As the publication writes, this would create a corridor between Ukraine and Belarus. The second red line concerns a military provocation against the Baltic states or Poland, or a targeted attack on Moldova. In particular, it may be an attempt to test NATO's ability to respond in a phase of possible confusion. This implies, as the article says, an election season in Europe and the United States, which may make the Kremlin think that NATO is distracted, but the alliance will not want to put up with such aggression. In turn, I would like to remind you that Russian missiles have already been in the airspace of Romania and Poland. In Sweden, security services are investigating a series of recent train accidents that they suspect may be acts of sabotage by Russian Federation. Moscow tried to destroy signaling system on Czech railways, and in Estonia, Russia is being held responsible for long-standing disruptions to GPS signals in the Baltic Sea region. At the same time, the United States may intervene in the war between Russia and Ukraine and send troops to the combat zone, said Democratic Minority Leader of the House of Representatives Hakeem Jeffries.
We can't let Ukraine fall because if it does, then there is a significant likelihood that America will have to get into the conflict, not simply with our money, but with our servicewomen and our servicemen. Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic minority leader in the House of Representatives of the U.S., in an interview with CBS.
Let me remind you that earlier French President Emmanuel Macron did not rule out sending troops to Ukraine. According to him, if Russia goes further in Ukraine, the West will have to consider sending troops. In an interview with The Economist, Macron said that the question of sending Western troops to Ukraine legally would arise if Russia breaks through the Ukrainian front lines and Kyiv makes such a request. Macron called Putin's Russia a force of regional destabilization and a threat to the security of Europeans. As we have already reported, the Russian army will conduct exercises with tactical nuclear weapons in accordance with the instructions of their dictator. And although, according to American General Ben Hodges, Russia's threats to use nuclear weapons are unlikely to be backed by a real determination to use them, and more people now understand that these are only threats. Putin continues to intimidate the West, and the main thing is not to be afraid of it. Russia currently gets stuck in Ukraine and NATO sending more troops into countries neighboring the Russians. The alliance is better prepared to attack than before, but the Russian economy was switched to military one, and it will be difficult for Moscow to return from the war economy. That is why the Baltic countries are already expecting new attacks and are preparing their borders for possible military invasions. Excavators and concrete mixers have taken to the fields in Estonia to renew NATO's eastern border with Russia. Hundreds of reinforced bunkers are being built as part of the new line of defense to protect the Baltic states. Lithuania is building anti-tank barriers with barbed wire and concrete blocks on its borders with Russia and Belarus too. Along the Latvian border with Russia and Belarus, the military will create a chain of strongholds, defensive fortifications, obstacles and ammunition depots. The first defensive line will be created at a distance of about a kilometer from the border with Russia. Over the course of 5 years, Latvia plans to spend 300 million euros on strengthening its borders. The Latvian plan provides for the creation of a chain of obstacles and the use of natural barriers, rivers, swamps and forests. At the same time, mining on fields can occur in the event of hostilities. But for now, we are only talking about obstacles without the use of explosives. Latvia will first focus on the first line of defense and plans to dig anti-tank ditches along the border and then strengthen it with dragon teeth. Moreover, each neighborhood will have its own solutions. In reality, however, Baltic leaders see Russia's defeat in Ukraine as the best way to ensure their own security. Let me remind you that earlier, the representative of Ukrainian intelligence, Vadim Skibitsky, said in an interview with The Economist that Russian troops could capture the Baltic countries in just 7 days, while NATO's response to aggression could take up to 10 days.
If Ukraine's neighbors do not find a way to further increasing defense production to help Ukraine, they too will eventually find themselves in Russia's crosshairs. The Russians will take the Baltics in 7 days. NATO's reaction time is 10 days. Vadim Skibitsky, representative of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, in an interview with The Economist.
But General and former commander of the Polish ground forces, Waldemar Skrzypczak, believes that Poland and Lithuania need to build fortifications and mine the territory on the border with Russia and Belarus. At the same time, he considers it unlikely that Russia could wage war against NATO right now. Let me just remind you that few people believed in a full-scale invasion of Ukraine and a big war in Europe. And this is where we are now. But let no one say later that we were not warned. Foreign Minister of Ukraine Dmytro Kuleba said that if Russia attacks the Baltic countries, they will defend themselves and in the end, NATO will win. But look at Bakhmut, Avdiivka. This is what the Baltic countries could look like after intense fighting. And we don't want that. This is what cities will look like in case of a big war. There will be no beautiful Vilnius, said Kuleba. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching. Stay updated, comment, like and subscribe to our UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support really matters. Goodbye.